Well, another very warm welcome back, all my vintage dirt bike loving YouTubers, and thanks to you all again for retuning to my Classic Dirt Bike TV channel. And of course, many thanks to the brand new subscribers who have recently signed up to my channel. It's good to know that you're finding something in here to interest you with regards looking at these old vintage racers. Now, coming up in this next video, we're going to take a look at a bike that I spotted at the 2019 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. Now, this is not a fully blown motocross machine, but it's more or less a road trail enduro bike. So without any further delay, let's jump straight into the video and take a look at this BSA 175 Tracker. Now, this feature bike, of course, is not a fully blown vintage motocrosser, and it's more or less just a little fun road trail enduro type of motorbike. But the main reason for taking a look at this bike is really because of its rarity. Now, when BSA closed its doors in 1973, and of course the subsequent liquidation of Norton Villiers Triumph in 1978, the BSA brand name was then sold to a new buyer who then proceeded to call themselves the BSA company. Now, they then bought the trading rights to the BSA name brand, and this newly formed BSA company then began producing small trail bikes that were originally fitted with 50cc Marini engines before then going on to produce these bigger 125 and 175 motorcycles. Now, although the frame is of course a BSA chassis, almost every other part on this bike is essentially just a Yamaha DT MX125 with a BSA badge on the tank. Now, the motor was a two-stroke single-cylinder engine with a 6-speed gearbox, of course, and there was also a 175 version of this bike available, and you could buy them in either red, blue, or as in our case, this white colour. Now, because the engine was a Yamaha motor, it was very reliable and had a decent spread of power for a little 125, and of course it also had Yamaha's well-proven auto lube system, which lubricated all the important parts of the engine, and of course it also had a separate oil storage tank. But as you'd expect, the bike's forks and wheels are straight from the DT 125 Yamaha, because let's face it, there's not much BSA in this particular BSA other than the frame, which of course we've already mentioned. But nevertheless, the front and rear suspension was certainly adequate for a 125 machine. Now, the engine also had electronic ignition, which is what you'd expect on a Japanese road trail bike from 1981, and again a full lighting kit and direction indicators, and of course a nice headlamp guard just in case you encounter any stones or other debris while riding off-road. But these 125s were also equipped with this quite high level exhaust system to keep the pipe from being damaged if you ever decided to race it or take it off-road, although the full-up weight of this bike was just over the 200 pound mark, so it wasn't a big heavy lump, which is what you'd expect from a little 125. But when these 125 and 175 BSA trackers were launched in the early 1980s, they were only available for sale in the UK or Australia, which was very strange, although I think it may have had something to do with the copyright of using the Yamaha DT engine and parts, but it is quite weird how it was not available for sale in Europe or many other countries. But these little trackers had a single rear shock suspension system, which was again probably to do with the rest of the Yamaha bits and pieces that were fitted to the bike, but limiting the bike for sale in only 2 countries surely must have had a big impact on the bike sales, and that's more than likely why you never see many examples of these trackers going around these days, because there were very few actually made. Although having said that, if it wasn't for the bike having a BSA frame, then this would still just be another Yamaha DT 125 machine with a BSA badge stuck on the tank. But as you can see, the little bike was fully equipped with all the DT Yamaha controls and switch gear, and the bike even had a rev counter which was also included, just so that you could keep an eye on just how hard that little two-stroke motor was actually working. Although essentially, if it was fitted on the DT 125 or 175, then you would have found the identical controls fitted here on your BSA Tracker. But let's face it, these trackers are not something that you see every day, and this example from the Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show was the very first one that I'd ever seen, and even when I first clapped eyes on this bike, it took me a little while to decipher the sum of all its parts, because at first I couldn't initially grasp the idea of BSA making such a nice little two-stroke motor, but of course the idea was then dashed immediately that I learned more about the bike. Although, mind you, at the end of the day, this was of course the last gasp at trying to resurrect the once iconic BSA brand name, and although it was a nice little dream, you're never ever going to pass off a new BSA model using predominantly parts from a Japanese machine, and who knows, if the new BSA company had actually used a British-made 4-stroke power plant, then things may have been completely different. But I do expect that they thought that the BSA name on any kind of motorcycle was more than enough to get the punters buying the bikes in their thousands. Although of course the BSA fanatics are a loyal breed, and only purebred British-made BSA bikes are good enough for them to part with their hard-earned cash. But as I said, not a fully blown vintage motocross racer, but nevertheless a very rare and interesting machine, and certainly one of the first ever BSA trackers that I've ever come across, and I was quite happy just to grab these pictures of it at the Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that very brief look at quite a rare and unusual machine, that BSA 175 Tracker. Not of course a fully blown BSA, but nevertheless it certainly has the BSA badge on it. Okay, coming up next, we're still in the process of making arrangements to go and film some brand new material for you to see here on my Classic Dirt Bike TV channel. We have some fantastic bikes lined up, so make sure you continue to subscribe so you don't miss any of these fantastic bikes coming up in future videos here on my channel. But until then, of course, everybody continue to be safe and well, and we'll all speak again when we return to view more of these vintage classics right here on Classic Dirt Bike TV.